Okay, everybody, so we got some big signing news late Friday afternoon. Pending restricted free agent Joel Eriksson Ek has signed a big 8-year contract extension with the Minnesota Wild, keeping him in Minnesota for the foreseeable future. We're going to delve into it here and take a look. Before we begin, though, I just ask you please subscribe and hit that thumbs up if you haven't. Helps the channel so much and is greatly appreciated. But let's get into it here, looking at Joel Eriksson Ek's new 8-year contract with the Minnesota Wild. Eriksson Ek is a 24-year-old center who is coming off his best season in the NHL, and his new contract goes for 8 seasons at $5.25 million per year in Minnesota. And like I said, last year was his best NHL season. In 56 games played, he scored a career-high 19 goals, 11 assists for a career-high 30 points, and was a plus 16 on the year. He finished 4th in the Selke voting. He was almost a finalist for the Selke Trophy, and I would not be surprised if he wins a Selke at some point in his career. He's a great two-way center who is really starting to come into his own offensively, and all in all, I really like this deal for the Minnesota Wild. So, right off the bat, people are going to be saying 8 years, way too long. You're locking yourself in, 8 years is a long time. 8 years is a long time, but Joel Eriksson Ek is 24 years old, just starting to really come into his own as a top 6 NHL player. Minnesota, down the middle, needs a player like Joel Eriksson Ek. Center is an issue spot for them right now. They don't really have a lot of high-end talent down the middle. Eriksson Ek is not really a number 1 center. I don't know if he ever will be. He definitely isn't right now, but he can be a very, very good number 2. Eriksson Ek can be an extremely good number 2, and one of the biggest reasons for that is his two-way game. He hasn't been a huge point producer, but his defensive game, ever since he's come into the league, has always been fantastic, and it's only getting better. Even if the offense never fully comes for Joel Eriksson Ek, and he's only a 40, 45-point guy in a normal season, you're going to get shut down defense from him. Now imagine if the offense does come. Imagine if you get the shutdown defense and the offense does come to the point where he's getting 60 points in a season, maybe even 70 points in a season. You are looking at a potential Selke Trophy winning center here who is just 24 years old. This is very likely to be a great deal for the Minnesota Wild because it's rather low risk. $5.25 million is not a huge cap hit for a guy that has 50-plus point potential and is going to be an elite shutdown center. And that's the big thing, is that a lot of times when teams sign these long-term deals, if the player doesn't get there offensively, or if the point production isn't there, the value of that player significantly decreases, and it ends up being a really, really bad contract. But I don't see that happening with Eriksson Ek because his defensive game is not just going to fall off a map. He's not just going to become a terrible defensive player. So at the very least, if you're the Minnesota Wild, you have that security blanket of having a great shutdown center in the middle of your lineup, even if the offense doesn't really develop much past where it is right now. And I think it's going to. I think Eriksson Ek has more to give offensively. I think as he continues to develop and grow into the prime of his career, into his mid and late 20s, I think you're going to see his offensive output increase. And I think he is going to be a 50-plus point guy. And if your second-line center is a 50-point guy with elite shutdown abilities and a Selke Trophy candidate, I am very willing to pay him $5.25 million per season. So I think this is a great deal for the Minnesota Wild. And if I were a Wild fan, I would be really, really happy. I know 8 years is a long time, but this kid is only 24. He's still getting better. He's significantly improving offensively still at this point. He's a great defensive center. And because of his defensive ability, you always have that security blanket there that he's never going to be useless. You know, somebody who is a pure goal scorer, if they stop scoring goals, they're pretty much useless. They don't bring a whole lot else to the table. If the offense doesn't come for those kinds of players, then their contracts end up being really, really bad. Look at Jeff Skinner. Jeff Skinner in Buffalo has a 40-goal season, gets paid $9 million a year, and then can't even score 20, and is absolutely horrendous the next 2 seasons and has probably the worst contract in the league. That's not going to happen with Joel Eriksson Ek because you're always going to have that defensive ability. He's always going to bring something to the table. Even if he never becomes more than a 30 to 40 point guy, he's still going to have that Selke level defense. And that, I think, is really, really important when locking up a player for this kind of term. And all in all, I think this is going to work out really well for the Minnesota Wild. I loved what I saw from Eriksson Ek this season. There was way more scoring potential from him than we've ever seen before. There was just way more offensive impact on the play than we've ever seen from him before, while still maintaining that great defensive zone coverage and that great defensive play. And there was a reason he was top 5 in voting for the Selke this season. I absolutely love this deal. Absolutely love this deal. They needed a center. They're hoping that Marco Rossi turns out to be that number 1 guy, that high scorer, because I don't think Eriksson Ek is ever going to be a scoring number 1 center who's putting up, 80 points in a season, maybe 90 points in a season. Like, that's not his game. But I think he is going to be a really good number 2 or a really good number 3, depending on how your center depth is, for a long, long time in the NHL. And I think that this lower cap hit at 5.25 is going to work out really, really well, because you know what you're going to get from him. He's a middle 6 guy. He plays great in his own zone, and that is never going to go away. Great defensive players don't just stop playing great defense. That's not something that happens. Offensive production can come and go for different guys. Sometimes they have a really big year. Other times they have a really down year. Injuries can really affect offensive production, but great defensive play and being a really smart hockey player, that never really goes away. He reminds me a lot of a young Mikko Koivu. We know how good Mikko Koivu, what kind of career he had for Minnesota, and I think Eriksson Ek is going right along on that same path, same kind of player. And I think he's going to be a really good middle 6 center for Minnesota for a long, long time. This is a great contract, and I cannot wait to see how it works out. I love what I saw from this kid this year, and I think that he's only going to continue to improve from here. And let me tell you, if he turns into a 50-plus point guy while maintaining the Selke level defense, this contract is going to be an absolute steal. But Joel Eriksson Ek re-ups with the Minnesota Wild on a contract that I absolutely love. 8 years at $5.25 million for a 24-year-old center with Selke Trophy level abilities. Great two-way player, and I am really, really excited to see how the rest of his career goes in Minnesota. And, he'll be in his early 30s when this deal is up. We'll see what happens after that, whether he re-signs with Minnesota again or if he ends up going somewhere else in free agency, much later in his career. But he will be a player on the Minnesota Wild for a long, long time, and I absolutely love it. So, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description. If you'd like to further support the channel, links to our Patreon, merchandise store, donation link, and channel memberships are down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.